Oh, okay. Yeah, can we know anything about other figures in Christianity? Did the disciples exist? Peter, John, James, etc. And how did the travels of their deaths get recorded? Because Christian fundamentalists like William Lane Craig, Michael Conan, and other Christian fundamentalists would say that the disciples died for their belief in the resurrection. People like Barterman and Richard Carrier have already responded to this argument. But Bob, what are your thoughts on, the claim of the disciples and their history and stuff?
We know nothing about the supposed 12 disciples. The Bible doesn't even tell us hardly a thing. With James, the son of Zebedee, we're told in Acts that he was beheaded, and yet there's a conflicting tradition in Papias that it was not only James but his brother John. They were both killed at the same time, whereas other Christians say, oh no, John lived to be 100 years old. And we hear absolutely nothing about the others, with the seeming exception of Peter. But Peter appears to be a kind of Dr. Watson figure in Sherlock Holmes. He does this masterful deduction of who the villain is and what happened, and Arthur Conan Doyle has to explain to the reader how Holmes did this. So he has Holmes' sidekick, Dr. Watson, ask for clarification. I say, Holmes, how did you deduce that little Sally was the Shropshire slasher? And then Holmes says, elementary, my dear Watson, and he explains the whole thing for the benefit of the reader. In Buddhist stories, you have Ananda, the disciple of the Buddha, who's a bit thick-headed, and he will bring up some good idea, he thinks, only to have the Buddha say, no, that's not going to work. This is the way we're going to do it. Peter is always the same sort of character. Gee, Lord, how many times must I forgive my brother? What, a big 7 times? No, 70 times 7. Again and again, Peter comes up looking like an idiot because he's supposed to. He's giving Jesus, he's the straight man. He poses a question for Jesus to answer for the benefit of the reader. Gee, Lord, what did you mean by that parable? He says, what, you don't get this parable? How you can understand any of my parables? Okay, here we go. The sower is the son of man. And so he's just he's like a footnote. It's like, okay, reader, we know you're wondering about this. Here's Peter's, he's asking your question. And which is one big reason Peter looks like such a moron. And it's not the poor guy's fault. He's just a fictional prop. Now, there might have been such a person, but the Gospels can't even quite agree on the names of the 12, and some of them sound suspiciously like the desposunoi, the heirs of Jesus, so-called James the Just, Simon Bar Cleophas, and so on, Judas, Thomas, and so forth. Robert Eisenman has come up with what I think is a convincing theory that the original or the earlier group of authorities were the so-called Brethren of Jesus, and that they got fictively divided up. Several of the 12 kind of reduced. Some of them have the same name even. A couple of Simons, a couple of Jameses, and so on. They are expanded, multiplied versions of the original pillars, as they're called, Cephas, James, and John. But we know nothing about these people, and even the idea that the brethren of Jesus, as Carrier and Wells and many others say, that is not necessarily a statement about biological descent, and there are many options as to what that might be. And the single passage where James is called the brother of the Lord, there's a good argument that that's an interpolation anyway. So we really know nothing about him. Now, one weird parallel that might be relevant, Madame Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical Society, she claimed to be in touch with the ascended masters, these immortal adepts who lived in the mountains of Tibet. They've transcended mortality, and she had all sorts of fancy names for them, Kuthumi, Moria El, etc., 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 a bunch of them. Research has shown that, and she, oh boy, what a character she was. She would claim to have revelations from these guys that would flutter down from a vent in the ceiling. And she said, oh, here's another revelation. Well, that was hokum, but somebody researched and found out that these guys did actually exist. They were just friends of hers. She just made them into these, gave them these funny names, and said that they were immortals in Tibet and so forth. So there was a historical basis, but it was totally contrived. In the same way, it's possible that behind the fictive apostles, there were church leaders of the 2nd century who tried to associate themselves. As for Paul, I think that Hermann Dettering and various others are right that Paul is the same guy also known as Simon Magus, Simon the Sorcerer, because when he is described in the Charagmata Petru, the preachings of Peter, and even in the book of Acts, it's pretty obvious we're talking about Paul under another name. The law is over, and salvation is by grace, not by works of the law, and so on. And Peter confronts him, much as in the book of Galatians, when they tangle at Antioch. And I think, yeah, that's right, that he was known as Paul in some circles and Simon Magus in others. So yeah, I think, and Simon is mentioned by Josephus as a kind of Rasputin figure connected to the Herodians and so forth. And so yeah, I think there was a historical Paul, just that he's Simon Magus.
Oh, okay. So we don't have any reliable records about them believing the resurrection. And then
oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, the only reason anybody even thought the 12 were martyred.
Because Richard Carey said there's nothing in the New Testament that says they died for their belief.
That's right. And when you look at the books that say they were, these are wildly unhistorical, fanciful legends where Andrew and Matthias go preach to the cannibals, and Paul is executed by Nero, but then immediately rises from the dead and threatens Nero. You're next, and just all kinds of crazy, fabulous stuff that is much wilder than anything in the New Testament. You're going to take this as history, and even if we knew they were martyred, and we don't know that, you'd have to ask if the Roman inquisitors were in the habit of giving you a chance to recant. We don't know that. I mean, from what we read in the sources we have, I said, I hear you're a Christian, come with me. We don't know that they were like, giving the thumb screws. Now, you renounce that Jesus guy, right? No, I'm not going to do it. Ouch! Well, there's no reason to think this happened. And so it's just amazing to me what apologists will resort to